For a long time, Lewis Hamilton enjoyed the services of a great support driver. Even though Valtteri Bottas wasn't always fast enough to defend for him, he was always willing to do whatever it took to help the team. This year is totally different. Even though George Russell is a team player, he looks far too quick for Hamilton. Stay tuned to find out all about it. First up, winning or whining. It's never easy to adjust to change, especially when your position is threatened. That's what Fernando Alonso found out in 2007 when Lewis Hamilton joined his team. The young Brit was lightning fast, fiercely competitive, and determined to win. Now, Hamilton might be experiencing that himself. Throughout his career with Mercedes, he has never before faced a younger, talented driver as a teammate. He was first partnered with Nico Rosberg, and their rivalry ended when Rosberg retired in 2016. Then, for 5 years, Valtteri Bottas was the perfect wingman. He was never competing for the championship, and so it always made sense to play a supporting role. But this year is a different story. Mercedes have looked towards their future and decided to finally give George Russell a seat. He is widely considered one of the most talented drivers on the grid, and this year has just proven it. And two-time world champion Mika Hakkinen thinks that Hamilton isn't happy about that at all. He said, "It must be hard to be beaten by George. I'm afraid this will be a really difficult season for Lewis." George Russell himself has absolute faith in Lewis. He said in the past that he's sure Hamilton will come back from his lows stronger than ever. Russell also said that behind the scenes, it was Hamilton who was pushing and motivating the team to do more. For 3 long seasons, Russell has been tortured by driving the slowest car on the grid. The worst part was that everyone knew his potential. He won Formula 4, the GP3 Series, and Formula 2 titles on his way to F1. Now that he's got a strong car, nothing is stopping him. Next, we have the comeback king. But don't count Lewis Hamilton out just yet. He put in a champion's performance in Spain. He got off on the wrong foot in the opening lap when a collision with Magnussen lost him the P6 that he fought for in qualifying. After the incident, Magnussen was heard over the radio accusing Hamilton of foul play. He said, "Lewis knew what he was doing there. He rammed me." Even the commentators couldn't understand Magnussen, and Martin Brundle said it just wouldn't make sense for Hamilton to risk valuable places to take out a Haas car. But after the race, Magnussen had cooled down a little and admitted that it was just in the heat of the moment, and that he didn't really believe the 7-time world champion would hit him deliberately. Still though, the collision left Hamilton at the back of the pack with a lot of work to do. In the laps after the incident, Lewis told his engineers that it might be worth retiring the car to conserve the engine, but his longtime partner Peter Bonington, better known as Bono, told him not to give up. Hamilton was informed that they could still target a potential P8 or P6 finish if they played their cards right, and that's all the inspiration that Hamilton needed. He flew through the field and made up places left, right, and center. As he crossed the checkered flag, he was a position higher than where he started, in P5. There were flashes of the old Lewis. Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff was convinced that Hamilton had the pace to win if it weren't for the first lap accident. Could this be the beginning of a season comeback? How did Mercedes make such a big leap in performance? And what's the tough conversation that Toto needs to have with Lewis? Don't go anywhere, because that's what's coming up next. In the shadow, the Spanish Grand Prix was a stellar performance that showed Lewis still has some fight left in him, but it still wasn't enough to get him back into the top 5 drivers standings. And even worse for Lewis, he was overshadowed by another George Russell masterclass. Russell had a fantastic start to the race, and before he knew it, he was up into P2, but it was not easy hanging on to that position. Max Verstappen was hot on his heels and trying to find space to overtake him. Luckily for Russell, Verstappen had some issues with his DRS and wasn't able to cruise past on the straights. That meant that it was a much more even playing field, and Russell could show off his defending skills. Then, when Leclerc had an engine problem and retired, Russell was suddenly into the lead of the race. But then along came the other Red Bull of Sergio Perez, who passed Russell without too much hassle. Once he lost the lead to the Red Bulls, they disappeared into the distance. Russell finished 30 seconds behind race winner Verstappen in 3rd place. Once again, Mercedes had inherited some results after a Ferrari disaster. Both Leclerc and Carlos Sainz had problems. Leclerc's engine blew out halfway through the race, and Sainz had a costly runoff into the gravel that may have left him with some damage. It was a weekend to forget for Ferrari, but for Mercedes, it might be the start of a competitive era for Russell. Up next, a surprise in Spain. One of the biggest stories coming out of the Spanish Grand Prix was the huge leap in performance that Mercedes made. They have struggled to understand the porpoising issues of their car in the early season and have paid dearly for it. Lewis Hamilton has had his worst start to the season in his entire Formula One career, but his teammate George Russell has stayed consistent, scoring a podium and regularly finishing just behind the top 2 teams. And he continued this form with his brand new Mercedes in Spain. The team took some big upgrades to Barcelona in the hopes of finally ending the porpoising, and they have worked magnificently. During qualifying, Russell was able to split Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez to take P4. He was still more than half a second off pole position Charles Leclerc, but the signs are very positive. Finishing on the podium just cemented the fact that Russell truly deserves his seat at Mercedes. This begs begs the question, is George Russell now the #1 driver? In terms of seniority, power, and salary, it is clearly Hamilton still running the show. But if Mercedes are going to stand any chance at fighting for a championship this year, then at this point it is Russell they should be focusing on. Russell's results this year showed driving maturity. He's able to defend aggressively without incidents and take opportunities when they come to him. His consistency in an underperforming car has put him in 4th place in the driver's standings, which is only a couple of race wins away from the top spot. With Hamilton barely higher than McLaren driver Lando Norris, Toto Wolff may be forced to have some difficult discussions with Hamilton soon. And still he rises. In Spain, Lewis could only dream of being up ahead with the race leaders. After qualifying in P6, Lewis was trying to make it out of the first few turns alive, but that never happened. He had a collision with Kevin Magnussen that sent him to the back of the pack, and he was not too optimistic about it. But when he floated the idea of retiring the car over the radio, Hamilton's engineer Bono told him that the team believed he could finish as high as P6. That seemed a mighty task for a car that had placed in P13 2 races ago and struggled to get past Pierre Gasly's AlphaTauri. It was going to take a mammoth effort, and for the first time this season, Lewis was looking in form. He tore through the field, taking over his opponents one by one until eventually he was battling with Carlos Sainz for P4. By the end of the race, he had finished higher than the engineers had anticipated in P5, and judging by his race pace, if he didn't get into a collision with Magnussen, he might have been fighting for the win. The performance of Mercedes in Spain has inspired a lot of confidence for Toto Wolff, who thinks that they are back in the contention for the World Championship. He said, "We just need to have a car able to finish 1st and 2nd. We have reasons to believe we can get there. If you know anything about Mercedes, you know that they are capable of anything, and if they rejoin the title fight, it could be one of the most exciting seasons of all time." Do you think that Hamilton could make a late comeback this season to challenge for the title, or is his teammate George Russell just too strong? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.